The world is full of artifacts and lost relics. Some of these objects exist in the realm where history and legend overlap. Today, we'll be looking into the legendary, mysterious, and holy objects, Iceberg. Enjoy. Ark of the Covenant. When people think of Moses receiving the law from God on Mount Sinai, most of the time they have the Ten Commandments in mind. But in reality, a massive part of the instructions given to Moses in the book of Exodus is a detailed description of how to build various ceremonial structures, including the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark, literally a box or chest, was a wooden box overlaid with gold used to hold and transport the Ten Commandments. The Ark was designed to act as the seat of God within the most sacred part of the tabernacle, a sort of portable prototype for what would later become the Jewish temple in Jerusalem. Throughout the biblical narrative, it is kept by the Israelites. The Ark was at one point brought out by the Israelites into a battle against the Philistines. During the battle, the Philistines captured the Ark and took it as a prize to the city of Ashdod and the temple of Dagon. There it is said to have caused the idol of Dagon to fall down before it and cause a plague of tumors among the inhabitants. The same plague broke out when the Ark was moved to another Philistine city called Ekron. Terrified of the Ark, the Philistines put it on a cart led by two cattle and let them go in whatever direction God would lead them. It ended up in the Israelite village of Beth Shemesh, where some of the people opened the Ark and looked inside. Some manuscripts read that this killed over 50,000 people, whereas others read merely 70. The Ark also killed a man who reached out to stabilize it when it was being transported by the order of King David several decades later. Strict rules were given to Moses about who was allowed to touch and handle the Ark, and every time they were disregarded, death and destruction was left in its wake. The Ark was housed in Solomon's temple in Jerusalem until it disappeared from the biblical narrative following the Babylonian siege of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple. It is speculated that somebody, namely the prophet Jeremiah, may have hidden the Ark before the invasion. It is also possible that it was taken as a prize during the Babylonian ransacking of the temple, although it is not specifically mentioned as one of the spoils anywhere in the Bible or in any other historical record. The Ark was never retrieved and never kept in the Second Temple. While few doubt the Ark's existence, its current whereabouts have been the subject of much debate. Several people throughout history have claimed to know the location of the Ark and have even claimed to have seen it themselves. For example, a pseudo-archaeologist named Ron Wyatt claimed to have found the Ark among other biblical sites. He claimed that it was buried beneath the site of Jesus' crucifixion, a somewhat mysterious and hotly debated location in itself, and that Jesus' blood literally dripped through the cracks to land atop the lid of the Ark. No actual evidence supports his claims, but he is probably the most famous individual to claim to have found the Ark. There is also a church in Ethiopia that claims to house the Ark, but no one is allowed to see it. The strangest claim of the Ark's location belongs to none other than the CIA, who, as part of their Project Sunstreak, claimed to have found the Ark. Project Sunstreak was a series of experiments designed to test and master the psychic ability of remote viewing, or being able to see distant locations without physically being there. In a declassified document from December 5th, 1988, it was reported that remote viewer number 32 was able to see training target number 0209, the Ark of the Covenant. The session summary reads, "Target is a container. This container has another container inside of it. The target is fashioned of wood, gold, and silver. The target is similar in shape to a coffin and is decorated with seraphim." The viewer sketched a drawing of the apparent seraphim on page 16, as you can see here. Viewer number 32 goes on to describe the location as being somewhere in the Middle East, saying that he heard people speaking Arabic and saw mosque domes, which he also drew. He wrote that the Ark was hidden underground in a dark and wet area and that it was protected by, quote, entities, which he drew that resemble a kind of angel described in the Bible. What's more is he says that the Ark is only able to be opened by those who are, quote, authorized to do so, and that it will not or cannot be opened until the time is deemed correct. Individuals opening the container by prying or striking are destroyed by the container's protectors through the use of a power unknown to us. All of this sounds like something out of a horror game or an ARG, but I'm dead serious. This is all from the official declassified document from CIA.gov. Like, if you've ever played Sons of the Forest, like, this is literally what the notes around the map sound like. Not to mention, this kind of just sounds like what happens in Raiders of the Lost Ark, but I don't know. The secretive and strange nature of this experiment makes it difficult to know what was really going on here. There is no way to confirm whether what the remote viewer claimed to have seen is a real place, and no way to confirm that this person was not either having some kind of hallucination brought on by whatever they did to get remote viewing to supposedly happen, or if they were just making up what they saw entirely. As for the location of the Ark, well, we have top men working on that. The subscribe button. This is an artifact that actually isn't hard to find at all. It's right below this video next to the channel name. A whopping 98% of you aren't subscribed. Subscribing is a free way to help out the channel and see videos as soon as they're uploaded. Now, on with the iceberg. The Philosopher's Stone. Throughout history, ancient chemists studied and allegedly performed a discipline called alchemy. Alchemy is essentially the practice of changing matter from one form to another, namely the transmutation of base metals into gold. Alchemy was thought to be the secret to creating an immortality elixir and the cure to all diseases. At the root of this old world science was the Philosopher's Stone, a stone, or an element, that innately held the powers of metal transmutation and immortality. The idea of the stone is thought to have originated with the ancient Greek alchemist named Zosimus of Panopolis in the 4th century AD. As a Gnostic, Zosimus believed in the purifying power of baptismal water and believed that a substance existed that could purify gold and silver. This led future alchemists to search for the materia prima, a primordial substance that is at the base of all matter, derived from the Platonic understanding of the world and its 4 elements. They speculated that this material would manifest itself as a sort of dirt or powder, and this mystical substance eventually became known as the Philosopher's Stone. Famously, a French notary and bookseller named Nicolas Flamel claimed to have channeled the power of the stone to change lead into gold in 1382. In the 1600s, Irish scientist Robert Boyle claimed to have performed the opposite reaction by turning gold into a less precious metal. Even our boy Sir Isaac Newton was on the hunt for the stone and was deeply invested in alchemy, a fact hidden by his estate until very recently. The name of this object is a bit misleading, as it's not some particular artifact, but rather an element that could theoretically be located in many different places. No such element has ever been discovered, and alchemy is no longer considered to be a valid form of science. The Holy Grail. The Holy Grail is said to be the cup used by Christ at the Last Supper. Despite the object being based in the 1st century story of the Gospels, legend surrounding the so-called Holy Grail would not arise until the medieval period in Europe. While myths of chalices and cauldrons containing magical properties go far back into antiquity, the idea of the Holy Grail in particular is thought to originate from an unfinished literary work by 12th century author, I'm not even going to bother pronouncing that. The work follows a knight named Percival who looks for a grail of unexplained significance. The work was unfinished, and various other authors attempted to continue the story, giving the Grail more Christian significance. In the 13th century, Robert de Boron's Arthurian poems overtly tie the idea of the Grail to the cup from the Last Supper. In the Arthurian legend, the Grail is not only that which was used by Christ at the Last Supper, but was also used by Joseph of Arimathea to catch the flowing blood of Christ from the cross. The Grail appears in many different European legends and stories, and has remained popular thanks to films like Monty Python and the Holy Grail, and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Jesus' burial cloth. The most famous purported burial cloth of Jesus is the so-called Shroud of Turin, a long linen sheet with an image on the front and back of a man who appears to have been whipped and crucified. Unlike the previous entries, this is an artifact that has actually been found and preserved for several centuries. It is also by far the most studied Christian artifact of all time. What is most interesting about the Shroud of Turin is the debate surrounding it. While its existence is obviously not up for debate, its authenticity certainly is. Since the Middle Ages, it has been paraded as the genuine burial cloth of Jesus, despite its first appearance in the historical record being of a bishop outing it as a deceptive work of a man who openly claimed that it was crafted rather than discovered. After centuries of serving as a tourist attraction, a team of American scientists formed the Shroud of Turin Research Project and conducted physical tests on the shroud in 1978. By studying the matter apparent on the shroud, the team concluded that the shroud image is that of a real human form of a scourged, crucified man. It is not the product of an artist. The bloodstains are composed of hemoglobin and also give a positive test for serum albumin. The image is an ongoing mystery, and until further chemical studies are made, perhaps by this group of scientists or perhaps by some scientists in the future, the problem remains unsolved. What you just heard was the official findings of the research project. Because the image on the shroud is not painted on with any detectable substance, it is thought by believers of the shroud that the image, and its reverse photonegative, was burnt onto the cloth via a flash of bright light or radiation. Despite the team's findings, other researchers have come to quite different conclusions. Also in 1978, another team of researchers used adhesive tape to study the surface of the shroud. The chemical microscopist, Walter McCrone, determined that the image on the shroud had been painted with a, quote, dilute pigment of red ochre, using a technique used in other works of art from the 14th century. McCrone also claimed that there was no blood present on the shroud. Radiocarbon dating tests in 1988 at several major universities also determined with a 95% confidence that the shroud dated to around 1260 to 1390 AD, in line with both the shroud's first appearance in history and the findings of McCrone. Forensic scientists also determined in 2018 that the blood patterns on the shroud do not match that of a person laying down, but rather of a person standing up, and that the bloodstains on the back are entirely unrealistic. A study done in July of this year also suggests that the image on the shroud reflects an image produced by the cloth being draped over a low-relief sculpture rather than a real human body. While debate about the shroud lives on, scholarly consensus is that it is a medieval forgery and not the genuine burial cloth of anyone, much less Jesus. Also, for those wondering, neither this nor the Shroud of Turin are mentioned in the Bible. That Jesus was buried with a burial cloth or wrapping is attested by the Gospel of John, in which the linen cloths and the headcloth are mentioned. However, no supernatural significance is given to the cloths, and no mention of any image is made. Excalibur. Like the Holy Grail, Excalibur is part and parcel of the classic Arthurian legend. According to Robert de Boron's romance poem Merlin, the sword was lodged in an anvil on a stone in a churchyard that mysteriously appeared on Christmas Eve. The wizard Merlin had foretold that only the true son of the King of England would be able to pull the sword from the anvil. A young Arthur approached the sword and was able to pull it out, identifying him as the king's son. The sword appears in many other Arthurian legends. Another version of the story involves Arthur breaking Excalibur in a duel and receiving the real one from the magical Lady of the Lake. Excalibur was allegedly found alongside Arthur's body in his purported grave at Glastonbury Abbey in 1191, and gifted to the King of Sicily by Richard the Lionheart. However, it is unlikely that the sword ever actually existed. Crystal Skulls. That's right, another artifact featured in the Indiana Jones movies. The crystal skulls are around a dozen carved skulls made of clear, milky white quartz that made their way into private and public collections around the globe in the late 1800s. The skulls were thought to be thousands of years old, originating from South American tribes imbued with supernatural powers. Most famously, adventurer Frederick Albert Mitchell Hedges eventually found the crystal skull, named after him, with his adopted daughter in British Honduras in 1924. His daughter, Anna, claimed that the skull she allegedly discovered could cause visions and cure cancer, and that she once used its magical properties to kill a man, and that in another instance she saw in it a premonition of the John F. Kennedy assassination. The skull was, however, determined to have been bought by Frederick at an auction in Britain in 1943. Several of these skulls have since been studied by scientists to discover that they were likely produced in the 1800s, rather than having any sort of ancient or supernatural origins. Holy Lance. The Holy Lance, or the Lance of Longinus, or even the Spear of Destiny, are titles given to the spear used to pierce the side of Christ while he was on the cross. The spear is mentioned in John's Gospel, but no significance is given to it in the actual narrative nor in the rest of the New Testament. Like the other Christian relics, the lance would not enter into the category of a mythical artifact until centuries later. There have been many objects purported to be the lance from the Gospel narrative. From the 6th century AD onwards, the lance was said to be in Jerusalem, then Constantinople, then taken to Paris. Despite a purported lance relic being moved to Paris in 1242, another lance was cited as being in Constantinople until 1453, when the city was captured by Sultan Mehmed II. His son then gave the lance to Pope Innocent VIII, and it has remained in Rome since, although different lance relics are displayed in Austria and Armenia. True Cross. The True Cross refers to the relic purported to be the actual cross upon which Jesus was crucified. While there have been many true crosses, the most famous one is said to have been discovered by Emperor Constantine's mother on a trip to Jerusalem. There are fragments of what people consider to be the true cross in churches all across the world as well. Protestant reformer John Calvin once remarked that all the extant fragments, if put together, would fill a large ship. Jesus' crucifixion nails. Like the rest of the crucifixion-related relics, the nails used to fasten Jesus to the cross are said to be in the possession of many different people. Legend has it that, along with the true cross, Emperor Constantine's mother found the nails during her visit to Jerusalem in the 4th century AD. There are also nails venerated as those of the crucifixion in Rome, Vienna, and many other cathedrals throughout Europe. The only set of nails ever given any serious consideration were a pair that were supposedly discovered alongside the ossuary of Caiaphas in 1990. Caiaphas was the Jewish high priest who oversaw the crucifixion of Jesus, and the nails discovered in his tomb are thought by some to be the nails used in the crucifixion. There is no real evidence for that claim though, and that the ossuary even belongs to the biblical Caiaphas is not entirely clear either. Moses' staff. The staff used by Moses throughout the early biblical narrative plays an important and even supernatural role. The staff is first mentioned when God appears to Moses in the burning bush. When God tells Moses to throw it on the ground, it turns into a snake and back into a staff when Moses retrieves it. The staff would go on to be essential in the Exodus story, as it is used to part the Red Sea and to draw water from a rock struck by it. The staff is also part of a story involving the Israelites' battle with the Amalekites, in which the Israelites prevailed as long as Moses kept the staff raised above his head. Various legends hint at where the staff ended up after the biblical narrative. One Jewish myth states that the staff was passed down through the Judean kings until it became lost after the Temple of Solomon was destroyed. A European legend suggests that it was in Constantinople until it was sacked and the staff was moved to France. Topkapi Palace in Istanbul now has a staff on display claimed to be the staff of Moses. Fountain of Youth. The Fountain of Youth is an ancient legend surrounding a magical spring that causes whoever drinks from it to become young again. Legends involving such a thing have been found in Greek writings dating back to the 5th century BC and extend into the early 16th century AD all the way in the Caribbean. It was popularized most by its attribution to the conquistador Juan Ponce de Leon. Literature promoting the conquistador's exploration suggested he was looking for the waters of Bimini, a mythical place known to the natives of South America. Unlike some of the other entries in this iceberg, the Fountain of Youth has no real concrete location or origin, and definitely no evidence for its existence. Trojan horse. The Trojan horse refers to the large horse-shaped structure gifted to the city of Troy by the Greeks that secretly held a group of soldiers who then attacked the city from within. The legend comes from the ancient Greek poem Homer's Odyssey, and most of the story's elements were thought to be completely fictitious until relatively recently in history. The city of Troy was thought to be made up until a city matching its location and description was discovered in Turkey in 1873. Since then, some credence has been lent to the Odyssey story about Greek soldiers capturing the city using deceptive means. However, whether or not something like the Trojan horse story actually happened is unknown. While ancient artistic depictions of the horse based on the legend have been discovered, no actual artifact has ever been found. Even if the Trojan horse existed, that a large wooden structure would survive and be extant today is nearly impossible, making this an artifact that will likely never be found. Crown of Thorns. Before Jesus' crucifixion, Roman soldiers wove thorns together and placed them on Jesus' head like a crown to mock his claim to authority. While the gospel accounts place no special significance on the crown beyond this and do not speak of its whereabouts after the crucifixion, since the 5th century a relic has been deemed the biblical crown of thorns and, after a lot of moving around, now rests at the Notre Dame Cathedral and is brought out and venerated every first Friday of the month. There are also remnants of the crown said to be kept in Belgium, France, Germany, Italy, and many other European countries. Veil of Veronica. According to legend, although not recorded in the gospel narratives, a woman named Veronica came up to Jesus as he was carrying the cross to the crucifixion site. Veronica wiped his face with a cloth, imprinting an image of his face onto the cloth. The story appears to have developed over time, as originally Veronica was the name given to the woman who, in the gospel narratives, was healed upon touching Jesus' robe. A 7th century AD text seems to conflate the woman from these stories as the one Veronica. The name itself appears to be a kind of portmanteau of the Latin word vera, meaning truth, and the Greek icon, meaning image. The actual veil imprinted with a face does not appear in the historical record until the 12th century AD. Several images claiming to be the veil of Veronica exist throughout the world, with the most famous one being kept in St. Peter's Basilica. Confederate gold. There are several accounts of large deposits of gold owned by the Confederacy in the American Civil War being lost or hidden. Several versions of the myth involve the gold being on a train car derailed near Lake Michigan, or thrown into Lake Michigan, or somehow ending up there by accident. Other myths involve the gold being taken from Confederacy President Jefferson Davis upon his capture. Other versions of the story suggest that, upon the Union invasion of New Orleans, Confederate authorities quickly moved millions of dollars of gold to Columbus, Georgia. It is also said that the FBI discovered buried Confederate gold in a township in Pennsylvania. None of the legends surrounding lost Confederate gold have ever been substantiated conclusively, leading many to remain on the hunt for the missing riches. Ark of Noah. Explorers have been searching for the remains of Noah's Ark for centuries. The biblical account describes the Ark landing on the mountains of Ararat, a mountain range in modern-day Turkey. While there have been several alleged locations, the most famous by far has been the large diamond-shaped geological formation in Durupinar, Turkey. Discovered in 1959 by the Turkish Air Force, and popularized by pseudo-archaeologist Ron Wyatt in the 70s and 80s, the site has been thought by many to be the Ark thanks to its odd structure and shape. Recent study done at the site determined that there are higher levels of organic matter and potassium in the soil compared to surrounding areas. The researchers argued that this provides compelling evidence of a unique, potentially man-made structure beneath the surface, distinct from the surrounding mudflow. The lead archaeologists on the project posited that these results were from decaying wood, i.e., the wood from the Ark. Surface scans also led the researchers to determine that there were underground corridors and passageways that they suggested are man-made and not simply natural dirt formations. The Turkish government is reluctant to allow any excavation, making it impossible to verify or test any of these claims. Roswell debris. In 1947, the US military was conducting a project known as Mogul, a project involving balloons carrying microphone devices intended to detect Soviet nuclear tests. When the debris from one of these balloons was found on a ranch near Roswell, New Mexico, it immediately sparked public interest. Rumors began circulating that the debris was from a flying saucer, that is, an alien spacecraft. In fact, it was the Roswell Army Airfield that first announced the debris recovered was a flying saucer. However, they later retracted the statement and said that it was actually just a weather balloon. The debris was later confirmed by the Air Force to be from Project Mogul all the way in 1994. The official explanation is that the military did not want to explain what the balloon was originally, and allowed the rumors about aliens to spread in lieu of having to out their reconnaissance project. Despite the official story, the Roswell incident cemented itself into American UFO lore. The rumors grew to include little green men being pulled from the crash, and the entire spaceship being taken by the government for experimentation. Because of this, the debris of the supposed spacecraft have been among the most coveted mystical objects in American history. Robe of Jesus. The robe of Jesus refers most commonly to the robe Jesus wore during or directly before the crucifixion. Along with some of the other relics mentioned above, the robe was apparently found by Constantine's mother on her visit to Jerusalem as well. The robe has been kept in Trier, Germany since the 12th century. There was also a robe kept in France. This relic, apparently gifted to Charlemagne around 800 AD, is said to be a childhood garment of Jesus rather than the seamless robe mentioned during the crucifixion. There are other pieces of the robe divided amongst the Roman soldiers at the crucifixion, said to be in the possession of several Orthodox churches throughout Russia. Buddha's relics. There are a number of relics associated with the Buddha that are kept and venerated around the world. Perhaps the primary relic associated with him is his ashes, allegedly discovered in China, along with more than 260 Buddhist statues. There are, however, other relics of his remains, such as bone fragments, teeth, and hair. Other relics such as alms bowls, clothing articles, footprint impressions, and locations where Buddha taught are likewise venerated throughout the world. More than just archaeological intrigue, Buddhist eschatology purports that all of Buddha's relics will come together one day and gather at the Bodhi tree, where he attained enlightenment and will then form his body. Abraham's pot. In Genesis 15, God appears to Abraham to make a covenant with him. As part of this event, the text says, there appeared a smoking oven and a flaming torch. The phrase is literally fire pot, something that would have been a common means of cooking during the time period. This is a very strange and unclear reference, and interpreters debate over the meaning of the text, with some suggesting that it is merely symbolic, with others arguing that the pot and torch are an actual manifestation of God. Either way, Istanbul's Topkapi Palace claims to have Abraham's pot. I'm not entirely sure if this is supposed to be the pot from the Genesis 15 event, or if it is meant to be a normal pot just owned by Abraham. I don't know. Zulfiqar. The Zulfiqar is the legendary sword of Ali ibn Abi Talib, the cousin and son-in-law of the Prophet Muhammad. The sword is being held in Istanbul's Topkapi Palace, but there is heavy debate on if this is the real historic sword, or if the sword ever even existed. Some researchers debate the authenticity behind this pointy shape, and see the blade as a regular double-edged sword. Others accept it, and some believe that the blade was standard and then forked after the Battle of Uhud. Palladium. The Trojan Palladium was a wooden statue depicting Pallas, or Athena to the Greeks and Minerva to the Romans, fallen from heaven in answer to the prayer of Elus, the founder of Troy. During the Trojan War, Odysseus and Diomedes stole the statue, where it was taken to Greece, and eventually ended up in Rome, where it was stored at the temple of Vesta until a fire in 214 BC. There was also an Athenian Palladium, which depicted Athena Pallias and is considered the holiest depiction of the goddess. It was last mentioned by Christian writer Tertullian, describing it as a rough stake, a sharpless piece of wood. Since then, it has been lost to time. Chinese treasure ships. During the Ming Dynasty in the 5th century, the Admiral Zheng He was sent to command massive armadas of ships called junks, filled with treasure for the purpose of expanding China's control surrounding the Indian Ocean. On top of carrying lots of treasure, the ships were said to be extremely large, with some records purporting them to be as huge as 600 feet in length, with crews amounting to 28,000 people. Although pieces of these ships have possibly been discovered, no intact or even partially intact remains of the ships are extant, making them, and the treasure they carried, highly sought after. Cloak of Muhammad. The Cloak of Muhammad is a relic believed to have been worn by the Prophet during the night journey in 621 AD. It was given by the founder of Afghanistan to the Beg of Bukhara in 1768 to solidify a treaty. In 1996, Muhammad Omar, the leader of the Taliban, removed the cloak from its shrine and displayed it for a large crowd, often seen as a key moment for the rise of the Taliban. The cloak was last seen in 2018 when Afghan President Ashraf Ghani opened the shrine to pray for peace during a 3-day ceasefire in Afghanistan. King Arthur's Round Table. The Knights of the Round Table are based on Welsh legend, also known as Arthur's Court in the Arthurian legend. The actual table first appeared in a work of literature from 1155, where it said King Arthur created the table to prevent fights among the knights over superiority. Although the story is a folktale and no actual round table is thought to have actually existed, a large table in imitation of the Arthurian relic was created in the 13th century for the Winchester Castle's Great Hall, used to hold a round table tournament, a traditional festival involving housing, feasting, and reenactment of Arthur's court. Nanteos Cup. The Nanteos Cup is, like the Holy Grail, said to be the cup used by Christ at the Last Supper. Unlike the Grail, the cup does not come from Arthurian legend, but is said to have been passed down to the Powell family from Nanteos when King Henry VIII disbanded all of the Catholic monasteries in England. It is said to possess supernatural healing powers and is currently kept at the Nanteos Mansion in Wales. Elixir of Life. The Elixir of Life is a generic term used for a potion that is supposed to grant the drinker eternal life. The earliest mention of an elixir is in the Epic of Gilgamesh. Since then, it's appeared in many forms around the world, such as ancient India's fermented drink called soma, or the pool of nectar, or, as covered earlier, an elixir created using the Philosopher's Stone. Holy Prepuce. The holy prepuce, otherwise known as the holy foreskin, is the removed foreskin from the circumcision of the infant Jesus. The earliest reference to the significance of the prepuce is from the Arabic Infancy Gospel, an apocryphal 6th century work in which it is said that a woman kept the foreskin in a bottle of perfume, later used by Mary Magdalene to anoint Jesus before his crucifixion. It was not, however, until the Middle Ages that various people claimed to have it in their possession. It was apparently given to Pope Leo III by Charlemagne on Christmas Day of 800 AD, who claimed that it was brought to him by an angel. While there were others floating around throughout European history, as of 1997, no more purported prepuce relics could be found. Brazen Head. A brazen head was a talking brass or bronze head that multiple medieval scholars owned. The brazen heads would respond to the owners, giving answers or confirming various rumors about politicians and religious leaders. The heads even appeared in literature of the time, describing the machines as powered by steam and water, not even being seen as supernatural devices. Seer stones. Seer stones were stones used in a form of divination that allowed people to see hidden objects. Most famously, seer stones were said to have been used by Joseph Smith to translate the Book of Mormon. Smith would place the seer stone in a hat and look into it, dictating the translation of the golden plates out loud. Before he acquired his fame through this use, Smith would use this technique to find buried treasure for people. He never actually found anything and was even arrested and taken to court by an angry customer who hired him to find treasure. Alkahest/Azoth. Alkahest was a theorized universal solvent from Swiss alchemist Paracelsus, supposedly capable of dissolving any substance. It was hoped to be used to gain control of medical healing properties not available at the time. Azoth is similar, believed to be the essential agent of transformation. It's actually the ancient name for the element now known as mercury, and was believed to be a hidden spirit in all matter that would make transmutation possible. Hihirokane. Hihirokane is a legendary Japanese metal said to shine brightly in a way that resembles flames. Literally translating to flame-colored metal, Hihirokane was apparently a common metal in ancient times and was hard, durable, and rust-proof. Although it is not thought to have actually existed, it has made its way into countless fictional mediums as a fantasy element. Toadstones. Toadstones are mythical stones said to come from the inside of a toad's head that could be used as an antidote to poison. Like a kind of pearl, the stone was thought to grow in poisonous toads and act as their own antidote. Turns out toadstones were not actually magical stones from toads, but are the fossilized teeth of an extinct animal from the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods. Templar treasures. The poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, known simply as the Knights of Templar, was a military order of the Catholic Church founded in 1118. Originally founded to protect Christian pilgrims who were visiting the Holy Land from attacks by Muslim raiders, the Knights Templar were said to have taken relics from the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. They had their assets seized in 1307, but a significant portion of their treasure was believed to have been hidden before it was taken. Artifacts included amongst the treasures are other famed holy items such as the Ark of the Covenant or the Holy Grail. The location of the treasures has been lost, but several locations throughout the Western world are said to house them. Joan of Arc's sword. According to legend, while on trial, Joan of Arc requested a sword that she said would be found at a church buried behind the altar. Lo and behold, a sword was found in the very spot she predicted. It was not just any sword, however, but was actually the very sword of Charles Martel, grandfather of Charlemagne. The sword was eventually hidden by Joan, and its whereabouts are still unknown. Hand of Glory. A hand of glory is the dried and pickled hand of a hanged man, which Europeans of the 18th century believed could freeze all persons it was shown to and could unlock any door it came across. The hands were prepared with a candle made of the fat of the deceased that would then be attached to the middle finger. The hands were used by burglars to send the sleepers of a house into a coma and unlock the doors for easy access. The hands appeared in stories until one was discovered by the Whitby Museum in the early 20th century. Drake's drum. Sir Francis Drake was an English explorer famous for accomplishing the second ever complete circumnavigation of the globe in one trip. He apparently had a drum that he took on voyages with him between 1577 and 1580, and was with him until his death off the coast of Panama in 1596. He is said to have vowed on his deathbed that if England were ever in danger and the drum was sounded, he would return to defend his homeland. On top of this legend, it is said that the drum beats by itself during times when Britain is in danger or when significant historical events take place. It allegedly beat when the Mayflower left from Plymouth in 1620, in 1914 at the start of World War I, and during the evacuation of Dunkirk in 1940. The drum currently resides in Plymouth. Lingurium. Similar to the earlier mentioned toadstones, Lingurium was the name of a mythical gemstone believed to be formed of the solidified urine of the lynx. This gemstone was thought to have medicinal properties as well as a kind of magnetic power. Belief in this stone goes back as far as the 3rd century BC, but it eventually fell out of popular belief following the Enlightenment. Sudarium of Oviedo. The Sudarium of Oviedo is said to be the cloth that was wrapped around the head of Jesus after being taken down from the cross. It is a small cloth that has a pattern of dark stains around the center. The cloth is alleged to be the one mentioned in John 20 verse 7, in which the author notes that the cloth that was on Jesus' head had been rolled up and left in the tomb after his resurrection. The Sudarium, however, does not appear in the historical record until several hundred years later when a bishop from Spain in the Middle Ages recounted its history. Those who argue for the authenticity of the Shroud of Turin suggest that the Sudarium stains match with those found on the shroud, and even posit that the blood present on both objects are of the same blood type. The Sudarium, however, does not have any visible image on it like the shroud. Sword of Victory. The Sword of Victory is the name of a sword that is part of the royal regalia of the King of Thailand. It is a double-edged iron sword with a quartz hilt held in a scabbard made of gold, inlaid with precious stones, and was among the relics discovered in a crypt at a Buddhist temple in Thailand. Legend has it that the sword was found in 1784 by a fisherman in Cambodia. When it was brought to Bangkok, the city was apparently struck by 7 lightning strikes. It is now used in the coronation ceremony of the King of Thailand. Cup of Jamshid. The Cup of Jamshid is a mythical cup of divination that is the subject of many Persian poems and stories. It was said to contain an elixir of immortality and could be used to see the different layers of heaven. It has also been depicted as a crystal ball in some myths. It is not thought to have been a real object. Nazi gold train. According to a famous urban legend, during the final days of World War II, the Germans hid a train filled with gold and treasure in southwest Poland. In 2015, 2 Polish men claimed to have found the train using underground radar technology. They entered into negotiations with the Polish government, who took the claim seriously and devoted special search teams to confirm the location of the train. Upon multiple searches, no such train was found in the alleged location. In July of this year, a group called Gold Train 2025 said that they know where the train is and have gained permission from the Polish government to dig in the undisclosed location. They have not posted any of their findings as of yet. Aaron's Rod. Aaron's Rod is the rod or the staff of the biblical character Aaron, the brother of Moses. Like Moses' staff, Aaron's rod was involved in multiple supernatural events. Most famously, the rod turned into a snake when Moses and Aaron were confronting the Pharaoh. It is also famous for producing buds, blossoms, and ripe almonds during a story in the Book of Numbers. The rod was kept either near or in the Ark of the Covenant after the budding event. However, centuries later when the Ark was brought into Solomon's temple, it was recorded that only the 2 tablets of stone were in the Ark and not Aaron's rod. Aaron's rod then, like the Ark eventually would, disappeared from the biblical and historical record and has been lost to time. Gates of Alexander. The Gates of Alexander are part of a set of mountain passes in eastern Anatolia, the Caucasus, and Persia. The gates south of the Caspian Sea first earned this title when Alexander the Great crossed through while pursuing Darius III of Persia. The gates became a symbol of Alexander's conquests and protection of the civilized world from the barbarians living beyond the gates. Jewish Roman historian Josephus was the first to mention these gates in the historical record and suggested that they were built to be a barrier against a tribe of people called the Scythians. The Scythians were known among the Jews as Magogites, the descendants of the biblical prophetic figure named Magog. Thanks to this, the gates eventually took on an apocalyptic/eschatological significance. The gates became known as a barrier built by Alexander against Gog and Magog, the end-time enemy of God's people. The gates, also commonly known as the Caspian Gates, have been speculated to be in several different locations. Popular suggestions include the gates at Derbent, the Pass of Dariel, and the Wall of Gorgon. Curtana. The Kurtana, or the Sword of Mercy, is a sword used in the coronation ceremony of British kings and queens. Its end is blunt and squared to symbolize mercy. It is thought to have originated in the 12th century AD, but historians are unsure. There also have been multiple swords that fit the description, and the same sword has not always been used. The one currently used by the monarchy was made between 1610 and 1620, and was first used in Charles I's coronation in 1626. The Emerald Tablet. The Emerald Tablet is an ancient text traditionally attributed to the legendary Hellenistic figure Hermes Trismegistus, and was understood as foundational to the practice of alchemy. According to legend, the text was originally included in the appendix to an Arabic work titled The Book of the Secret Creation and the Art of Nature. Alchemists throughout history have researched and interpreted the tablet. If you've ever heard the phrase, "as above, so below," you can now know that this quote is from the common version of the Emerald Tablet. Sibylline books. The Sibylline books were a collection of oracular utterances that the Roman Senate maintained control of. The books were used to form non-exact predictions of the future and consulted during times of crisis throughout the reign of the Roman Republic. When the Temple of Jupiter burned in 83 BC, the books were damaged, with only fragments of their remains recoverable. Afterwards, new books were collected to replace them, but they too were lost in a fire in 405 AD. Any books that exist today are collections designed to imitate the originals. Heorot. Heorot is the famous mead hall from the Beowulf poem. Beowulf defeats both Grendel and later Grendel's mother after they attack the hall. Although the hall is widely considered to be a location created for the poem, there is a theory that the hall is based on a hall from Hardy on the Isle of Sheppey. Near this real hall are cliffs matching those detailed in the story, as well as an inlet nearby named Land's End, which is called by name as the landing place of Beowulf on his way to Heorot. Q source. The Synoptic Gospels of the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, all share incredible literary similarities with one another. Not just similarities in style or subject, but in actual content. Around 90% of what is written in the Gospel of Mark appears word for word in the Gospel of Matthew. Luke's Gospel shares material with both of them, but specifically material that is only in Matthew and not in Mark. Scholars debate about which one was written first and who was copying from who. In the 19th century, New Testament scholars began to hypothesize about a document used by both Matthew and Luke that contained stories and sayings of Jesus that they added to what they took from Mark. This hypothetical source document was named Q after the German word Quell, which means source. The thing about Q, however, is that there is no actual concrete evidence for its existence outside the logical possibility given the data from the existing Gospels. It is not theorized to have existed based on any traditions or testimonies from history, and no such document is extant. It's not so much an artifact to be discovered, but a theory to be proven. Even so, if any such document was ever uncovered, it would revolutionize the modern study of the Gospels. Seal of Solomon. There is a legend that King Solomon possessed a seal ring on which the name of God was engraved and by means of which he controlled demons, as well as the ability to speak to animals. The seal ring was apparently given to Solomon from heaven, and one of 4 jewels gifted from angels was set into the ring. The legend of the ring was developed in ancient Arabic literature, where it was given its prominent powers over the demons and tales of how Solomon lost it. The name Solomon's seal was given to the 6-pointed star figure engraved on the ring that would eventually be known as the Star of David. Nehushtan. Nehushtan was the name given to a bronze statue of a serpent created by Moses in the Book of Numbers. During an incident in which the people of Israel became afflicted by deadly snakes throughout their camps, God tells Moses to craft a serpent out of bronze and affix it to a pole. Whoever was bitten by the snakes and looked at the bronze serpent was healed. Flash forward hundreds of years later, during the period of the Judean monarchy, where 2 Kings 18 records that the people were worshipping the bronze serpent and calling it Nehushtan, literally the Great Serpent. During King Hezekiah's campaign to restore proper worship to Judah, he destroyed the bronze serpent to stop people from worshipping it.